Welcome to the workshop Effective Learning and Instruction. My name is Candace, and I will serve as the instructor for this session. By the end of this workshop, participants will achieve 5 learning objectives. 1. Name 3 main methods of learning. 2. Identify 3 impediments to effective learning. 3. Differentiate between an effective method of spaced learning and an ineffective method of mass learning. 4. Describe a minimum of 3 tools or habits for keeping judgment accurate. And 5. Create a detailed practice plan for students in the interval learning method as related to their subject matter. In today's workshop, we will explore how students learn and discover the most effective and ineffective learning methods and study habits for students. In doing so, we will also understand how to improve our instruction methods to ensure students can align with the most successful types of study habits. In order to teach, we also need to understand how students learn on a cognitive level. Based on research by Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel, learning occurs through 3 main methods: encoding, consolidation, and retrieval. Let's explore the meaning and examples of each of these terms. Encoding allows us to mentally visualize the heard and seen teaching, which assists us in forming memory traces and the ability to recall the information later. Encoding could be visual effects or a sound or image connected with your instruction, which can often help it become more impactful than a simple lecture. Consolidation allows us to strengthen our learning by encoding information into long-term memory. By stabilizing the information over longer periods of time utilizing past knowledge, we are more likely to transfer it from short-term to long-term memory. Reviewing information periodically during the same week or even the same class should help students consolidate more efficiently. By utilizing retrieval, we can recall and apply knowledge between different scenarios and intervals, which creates a spaced practice. This allows us to transfer knowledge from one situation to the next, recognizing when it can be utilized effectively or not. This is where quizzing and testing can be most impactful, as it forces students to recall information and implement the skills on a more consistent basis without creating cognitive overload. Now that we understand how students learn, we want to understand the impediments to effective learning to avoid these obstacles when it comes to knowledge retention. There are 3 primary impediments to learning, including incorrect learning styles, the need to unlearn one piece of knowledge in order to learn a new one, and our own personal habits, intuitions, and distortions. Some of these impediments can be unconscious and may require deep examining to be correctly identified. Incorrect learning styles appear to be one of the biggest factors to create ineffective learning. Massed learning is often the preferred study method of students. However, this method often leads to successful short-term knowledge but failed long-term knowledge. Therefore, the perceived success is only short-lived and ultimately results in overall reduced retention of information. Another impediment to effective learning is the need to unlearn. This means intentionally opting to forget information stored in memory in order to make room for new information. Examples of unlearning might be disregarding what we know about our native language in order to learn a new language, or learning how to drive a car on the opposite side of the road when we are in a foreign country. Collectively, our own habits, intuitions, and distortions can impede our learning. We may remain biased on certain issues or perspectives because we tend to stick to our regular habits, thoughts, or preferences. As humans, we often have difficulty implementing change, so if our routines are not honestly self-evaluated regularly, we can become stuck in a rut of sorts, causing us to lack improvement in our learning capabilities. After recognizing the impediments to learning, we can utilize this information to compare ineffective versus effective study habits. There are many study habits which mistakenly seem to be effective when actually quite the opposite is true. Research by Jeff Norman focuses on the necessity of slowing down our learning in order to ultimately become more effective learners. Mass practice, as previously mentioned, is ineffective when it comes to long-term knowledge retention. Because it feels more productive short-term, students often prefer it and interpret it as also being productive long-term, but evidence shows otherwise. Massed study habits may include cramming, repetition, rereading, and mastering one skill before moving on to the next. A specific example of mass practice in basketball, for instance, would be repeating the same type of shot over and over until it feels perfected, then moving on to other aspects of the game. McDaniel outlines various ineffective study habits found to be common by students, including superstitions, food selections, repetition, and taking wasteful breaks. Eliminating ineffective study habits also means eliminating these unnecessary tactics. Unlike massed practice, interval or spaced learning reviews topics in a more sporadic method. Though it tends to feel slower in terms of results, interval practice typically leads to a better retention of knowledge and skill long term. Effective study habits to help keep judgment accurate include self-quizzing, cues, utilizing feedback, and teamwork. An example of interval or space practice would be focusing on all types of basketball shots in a mixed method, rather than focusing solely on free throws until the latter skill seems perfected. The top 6 science-based study skills, according to Memorize Academy, are 1. No cramming. 2. Rotating your learning ideas and content to encompass interleaving. 3. Ask questions, explain answers, connect with the information. 4. Seek real-world examples of the content. 5. Utilize words and visuals to help with encoding. And 6. Recall what you know through self-quizzing and retrieval. Now we can move on to designing our teaching and instruction to benefit students in the way they learn most effectively. In order to foster successful learning, we must find a way to align our teaching so it nurtures students' study habits. Matching our instruction methods with interval and space study practices, we can provide students with the tools to learn more effectively, both in and out of class. In addition to spaced practice, we can encourage students to use 5 other effective strategies of study, including elaboration, generation, reflection, calibration, and mnemonic devices. Let's review these study strategy types. Generation is forcing the mind to be more open to new learning, even though we may feel knowledgeable in a subject matter. We should continue to review information already learned, as practice still serves as a useful tool in retaining information. Even experts are found to utilize shortcuts, which tells us that overlearned and accessible information does not provide a guarantee of retrieval. Generation enforces the idea that learning is never complete and can always evolve, so continued evaluation is critical. Elaboration is pinpointing extra layers of meaning. This could include sound associations or creating a story to align with the subject. We can help students creatively adapt a narrative to recall information more quickly and easily. Reflection is a combined practice of retrieval and elaboration, which requires spaced review and seeking connections to the subject. By creating personal connections, a student may feel more attached to the subject, making it easier to recall. Teachers and students can take the study information and try to make real-world connections or find real-life situations which relate to the content. Calibration means recognizing our knowledge as well as recognizing our lack of knowledge. This means utilizing objective feedback in order to avoid obstacles and pitfalls. We often need to analyze and recognize what we don't know in order to transition that information into what we do know. Mnemonic devices can be used during instruction to assist with retrieving information to store it into memory. Cues can include sound association or acronyms. Think of Roy G. Biv for the colors of the rainbow, or Never Eat Sour Watermelon for the clockwise designation of the directions on a compass, north, east, south, west. We now know there are multiple effective study and instruction methods. More specific examples, which can be used while teaching and while studying, include testing and quizzing, peer instruction, cues, constructive feedback, teamwork, and simulation scenarios. Although there may be times students prefer specific methods or find certain instruction types to be less desirable, we should use the strongest tools at our disposal. Encouraging students to adapt to these effective methods beyond instruction, but also while studying, will more than likely result in their ability to thrive within the subject area. Understanding the methods of learning and the impediments to learning, as well as understanding effective study strategies, we can provide instruction to positively foster students' learning environments. Ultimately, the result is guiding students toward effective study habits aligned closely with our teaching methods, resulting in their success.